Hello, welcome to episode 5 of Spooky Boy and the Spirit Sisters, a podcast for the strange and unusual, by the strange and unusual. Today we talk about Ouija boards, but before we jump in, Cassidy has something to say.
So I'm going to start off by doing a little bit of housekeeping. First, I want to start by saying thank you all so much to the people who have supported our podcast and shared their stories with us. We're so excited to learn and explore all these spooky topics with you. We love hearing from you, and in order to grow our community, we are asking for your help. So please share us, share with us so we can share more with you. Like, follow, subscribe, share. Visit our website. Listen to us on your favorite app. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Buzzsprout, YouTube with closed captioning, and more. Stay up to date on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Even convincing one friend to listen to us, whether it's someone who likes this stuff or someone who would benefit from this community, it's a great way to open up the conversation. So again, share us, share with us so we can share with you.
And speaking of sharing with us, we posted a question on our social media a couple days ago asking all of you who your favorite cryptid is and why. And you guys definitely showed up for the occasion. We had Mystic Novelty Co. commented, "A favorite is so hard to pick, but I think the most underrated is the Loveland frog. A huge frog with a glowing wand. How do you beat that?"
I've never heard of that one.
I've never heard of that frog before.
That's a new one. I'm gonna have to definitely look
I want to look into that.
Yeah. I mean, hell, it's a giant frog with a frickin' wand.
Yeah. Well, it's a glowing wand.
Oh, a glowing wand.
Same difference.
Yeah.
Well,
Unless
we'll
it's a little
definitely
itty-bitty
look into
frog.
that one. I think it's Clonic or Cloanic commented Bigfoot and Skinwalkers, which Lauren stands Bigfoot and Sasquatch.
Yeah, we might have to dive into another episode with the actual Skinwalker Ranch. That's really interesting. All the stuff that correlates around that.
Skinwalkers are definitely, we do plan on taking a whole episode on that one. Just because of the accounts and all that goes with the Skinwalker.
Oh my God,
there's so much.
There's like, what, 1 or 2 documentaries on it?
Yeah.
And of course, we're definitely going to have to just clear away an entire episode for Bigfoot and Sasquatch. Because, Good Morning Sign Company responded with, "How about that Kraken?"
As we're drinking Kraken, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm out of Kraken, by the way.
That sounds like you need a refill. And then Sheer Madness 81 commented with the Banshee, I think. Who doesn't love a woman who screams, right? I mean, Susie Sue and the Banshees. No? Nobody? No?
Nobody.
Susie and the Banshees?
No. Yeah.
No? Yeah? Okay.
Oh, one.
Thank you,
Okay,
Cassidy.
one.
I got you.
Thank you for having my back on that one. And again, to bring up last episode, if anyone's looking for a professional Banshee, hit me up. I'll do it. Extra $50 for Freebird.
She'd be really good at it, too. Yeah.
And then we had another one that responded in our story. A Bigfoot, the social distancing champion of the world, which, as I said before, Lauren is a huge Bigfoot fan. Lauren stands for Bigfoot. And then the other one was Skinwalkers, because they can mimic anyone or any animal.
So it looks like, so far from the people who have reached out, pretty much Bigfoot and Skinwalker are like the number ones for people.
Mm-hmm.
What about you guys? We all know Amanda and Mothman go together like peas and carrots. What about you guys?
You know, I like the Yeti. I feel like, Bigfoot always gets all the love, but like...
I mean, isn't that just the snow Bigfoot?
Exactly.
Are they
Snow
like cousins?
Okay, yeah, but no one talks about the Yeti as much, and I feel like the Yeti deserves a little bit more praise. All right.
Well, did anyone ever, is the Yeti and the Abominable Snowman, like...
I think they're the same. I honestly believe they're the same.
Thing. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if I have a favorite cryptid.
Nessie.
I mean,
The
that's
Loch Ness Monster.
Loch Ness is pretty cool. but I also think that's a bunch of BS.
The Jersey Devil?
The
Chupacabra. Oh, what?
One more time?
Chupacabra.
The Chupacabra.
That just makes me think of that one Dexter's Lab episode.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
The goat sucker.
That's a good one.
I have to, I mean,
I like the Chupacabra.
Honestly, I mean, I guess really if it comes down to it, I'll have to pick the typical, like, Bigfoot, only because there's so many different reports. Well, there's so many different reports, so if there was ever a creature that actually did exist or does exist that's out there that we haven't discovered, Bigfoot's probably the one. Just because there's so many countless reports, potential pictures, potential non-bullshit videos, but, I mean, it's possible.
So today's topic is actually our first part of our divination series, where we plan on going into the different divination practices, tools, and all different kinds of things that relate to divination. And we figured we'd start with Ouija, since we've brought it up in, two episodes in a row? Three episodes in a row?
Something like that.
And it's that time of year where everyone sees one at a Halloween store and goes, yeah, it's spooky season. Let's do this. So we figured we'd go into a little bit about the Ouija board and how it came to be.
Yeah, there's actually not a lot about the origin of the Ouija board. A lot of historians, Robert Murch being one of them, has said that they've had a hard time tracing back the origin, but it gained a lot of prominence in the 19th century.
A lot of that has to do, too, with the fact that Ouija itself wasn't an actual thing. It was something that was invented later on. Scrying, using pendulums, runes, and the tarot, which we now know as tarot, all of those methods were used throughout ancient times and through all different cultures. But the actual Ouija board was a fairly recent thing that people used.
Well, a few people I want to talk about that had a big part in kind of starting off that popularity and spirituality and basically being the force that drove a lot of people to be interested in the Ouija board was the Fox sisters. So they're two girls. They lived in a farmhouse in Hydesville, New York, Maggie and Kate Fox. And Maggie was 14, Kate Fox was only 11 years old. And basically they just started hearing these weird knocks in their bedroom, and it seemed to almost respond to them in an intelligent way. So of course they have their mom come into the room and they ask to give specific answers. So the mom's like, okay, well, count to 5, or tell me the age of our neighbor. And these knocks from the walls all answered correctly. So also I just want to point out that this happened on March 31st. So the night before April Fool's Day. But at the time, no one suspected anything odd about it, including their mother. And the rumor that was floating around was that there was actually a peddler that had been murdered in their cellar of their farmhouse 5 years before the incident happened.
Oops.
Yeah, whoops.
How is that a rumor? If 5 years before that, A, how long were they in the house? And B, if someone was murdered in your cellar, I have questions.
I think everyone had questions. It was just I think people are just trying to think of things like what could possibly causing these knocks on the wall.
Murder.
Definitely murder. So the family, they eventually left the house, and the two girls then stayed with their older sister, Leah Fish, in Rochester, New York. And Leah was interesting. She was thought to be a medium. She was invited to join the Post family to help them communicate with their daughter who had passed away. And they had multiple people there to basically, make sure it wasn't bullshit. And after being evaluated, they were they couldn't find any reason why that, it could have been made up or any of them could have been doing anything. But the sisters ended up going on to book several professional tours. So they spread their knowledge of spiritualism with a bunch of different people, and everyone was eating it up.
I'm trying to figure out how could you debunk something back then? Nowadays we've got technology.
Yeah.
We kind of have a handle on things, but I'm trying to imagine people back in the day when all this weird shit's happening.
Yeah,
like what?
Yeah, it's so easy to do it now, but like back then,
well, I know that's why like Houdini was one of the many people who was calling BS on a lot of that stuff. I know he would. It was one of his. Well, yeah, because he was like, magic is that of being an illusionist. You know, it takes practice, it takes knowledge, it's tricking the mind and stuff like that. And he would go to these sessions of all these mediums and stuff, and he made it like his mission to debunk a lot of these people. Because he believed it was just that, as what was described then as parlor games. And he's like, that's all it is a fascination to drive, you know, the imagination when you're bored and got nothing to do. And I mean, I can't even imagine how boring the 1850s were.
I know, right? I mean, Maggie pretty much like debunked herself because
yeah, she did.
Years later, she confessed for $1,500, which was a shit ton of money back then.
I'd confess anything for that much now.
Seriously, right? She threw her sister Leah under the bus and said, "My sister Katie and myself were very young children when this horrible deception began. At night, when we went to bed, we used to tie an apple on a string and move the string up and down, causing the apple to bump on the floor, or we would drop the apple on the floor, making strange noise every time it would rebound." So they ended up eventually, according to her, graduating from the whole apple dropping thing to like cracking their knuckles, joints, toes to make like these knocking sounds. And she says, a great many people, when they hear the rapping, which just means knocking, imagine at once that the spirits are touching them. It is a very common delusion. Some wealthy people came to see me years ago when I lived in 42nd Street, and I did some rappings for them. I made the spirit rap on the chair, and one of the ladies cried out, "I feel the spirit tapping me on the shoulder."
Sick beats, bro.
But of course, that was imagination. So she basically confessed, like, yeah, this was bullshit.
Oh.
And it was actually believed that like the initial motive behind the statement is because she was trying so hard to like make a full-time career of her like mediumship and everything. And when it wasn't really taking off like how she wanted it to, it was like her next move was, well, I'm going to gain infamy in the spiritual community. So a lot of spiritualists ended up really resenting her for everything she did during this time. Obviously, because
it gives people a super bad, like, well, obviously, yeah, a bad name, but like, it's stuff like that. Like when we were talking about having our spiritual awakenings and having all of this stuff happen to us, you know, it automatically, people write it off as, oh, well, it's this, or oh, well, it's that. Like, there's always some form of explanation, but sometimes with the paranormal and when you experience stuff like this, sometimes there just freaking isn't. You know, it just kind of is. Mm-hmm. So it's, when you sit there and you lie about it, it gives the people who do have these gifts and do have these abilities.
Yeah, straight up bad name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's, I know we've said it before that you don't need validation for stuff like this to be like, no, I'm not crazy, like this actually happened. But it's like,
it's nice to have it
because of shit like this, you know, people going, you're faking it, or, you know, there's, you looked up online or you did this. Like it's.
Yeah. And then the spiritual community ended up hating her even more because then she, a year later, she took back the statement and said that, oh, whoops, like my spirit guides just coerced me to do this. Like, what? That was actually not true what I said.
Okay.
Yeah.
And she made amends with her sister Leah. She died in 1890. Kate passed away 2 years after due to like drinking related reasons. And then Maggie passed away 8 months after her sister Kate. So it was like a domino effect. They just all died around the same time. And then in 1904, these school children, they were playing by their old home, and they found remains in the cedar walls. And they examined them 5 years later, and it was just a bunch of weird bones, like odds and ends, like some chicken bones thrown in there. So like people were like, oh wow, were these the bones of the peddler that? And no, it was believed that like those bones were actually just planted by someone else who like lived around the area as like a hoax type thing.
Most likely.
So, yeah.
Well, using ruins and chicken bones, too, is part of a divination practice we can go into later. So, depending on where they found it and how things were, it could have been something that they used in some of their divination practices. Like, as someone who has gifts and has had strange things happen to them and practices divination, I always, with topics like this, I'm always like, okay, is there any way? Yes, it could have been debunked. Yes, it could have been this. But part of me is still like, but was it all bullshit? Like, some of the stuff it may have started as, like, oh, we're playing a game, and all of a sudden someone does develop a gift. Or it could have been the opposite way, like the opposite way around. Like, someone develops a gift, and then because gifts like this don't happen every drop of a pin, it takes time, but then it's like, well, how do I make money off this? Well, I can't just wait for my whims to decide to act up, so they start to make things up. So this topic, I'm so conflicted, because it's like, I can see on both sides how they could have done it, but
also, like, okay, I don't understand how you can be discreet with, like, an apple on a string.
Yeah.
Like, how long of a string? Like, where's the apple? Like, how did no one not,
how
like,
did no one
this?
not see the string?
Right?
Like, unless they're using some
cleverness.
Clear-ass twine.
Even the knuckle
wire.
thing, like, didn't they see, like, them, like, cracking their knuckle? I mean, I guess you could kind of hide your hands and stuff, but still, it's like...
I know it said, like, they would practice cracking their toes and stuff. So their hands could be flat on the table, and then they would just, like, snap their toes, their joints, like you described, without anyone even noticing. And they'd be like, so, like, someone would be like, can you, like, someone might be like, oh, Jimmy, are you here? And they'd be like, hold on, let us do our bullshit seance here. And then they'll snap their toe, and they'll be like, Jimmy is here.
Keep in mind, too. So, what year was this? This was...
like, 850s through the 70s, 1870s and stuff?
Okay. So, the clothing back then was a lot different. So, they wore bigger dresses. They had different attire. So, we could be sitting here at the table, and I could be fidgeting around with my feet, but not have it look like I wasn't, or like have it look like I wasn't moving because of all the different cloth that was used in my dress.
That's true.
So
you can hide a lot of apples in that shit.
So, and depending on the lighting, how they masked it, because like Houdini, it's all about the art of illusion. So think about when they first started, though. Like, all the stuff that was happening. You had the Fox Sisters really start to bring the spiritualism upright. Not too, like, long before that, America had the Civil War. So you have all these people who are just beside themselves from the death of family members. The Civil War was literally brothers and sisters and family members fighting with one another.
Yeah.
So you have all these people that are just mourning and grief, and then here comes spiritualism. Like, couldn't have been planned better, where people are like, want to get in contact with your dead relatives?
We got the thing for you.
Yeah. So,
wonder how they advertise that, to be honest. Like, I mean, I totally know they had the newspaper, but it was like a front page article.
It was, yeah, basically.
Probably, yeah.
And it was literally just like Ouija, the wonderful talking board. Like, all right.
And even before that, it was like a sideshow thing. So people would gather in parlors, and it was like a party trick almost, because occultism was on the rise, and it was something that people dabbled in.
Yeah.
So they would have these parties where they would host these seances, and they would advertise about it, and then the more people think about it, when you have a group of people, like a good group of people, and they're looking for a good time, they're more likely to believe things when you're in a group versus just 3 people. If I'm in a group and someone goes, oh my gosh, did you see that? And somebody else goes, oh yeah, no, I saw it too. Like,
Yeah, no one wants to
plays
feel
off of one
excluded,
another.
like I didn't see anything. So
Yeah.
most people would be like,
Right.
yeah, I totally saw something too, which is, psychology.
Yeah, especially at a time when everyone was so vulnerable, losing their loved ones and everything.
The life expectancy
Like-
was half of what we have nowadays.
Hey, man, those Fox sisters, they lived pretty long.
They were smart. They knew exactly what they were
They
doing.
lived into their 90s. Because they were like, I think they were born
they?
in like literally like the beginning of 1800.
Yeah.
I know, like, what was it?
Yeah.
Leia? Princess Leia? Princess Leia, Fox sister. She was like born 1800 and died like 1890. So she was 90.
Yeah. They did live pretty long, but then they all just like went out at once.
Yeah. But
Dominoes
Went out with
fall
a bang.
quick.
when they perished, it was right at the start when the actual Ouija board kicked off.
Yeah.
Now, Ouija, the name of the actual board is a trademark. That's not the
Hasbro.
name. Actually, was it Hasbro or was it the Parker Brothers?
Well, it was the Parker Brothers, which is now Hasbro.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. So, but before that, it wasn't the full board that people used. So, before the actual board came into play, it was literally the wooden planchette part. Now, with the board that we know today, you've got the tiny planchette, and then you've got the board, and you would move the planchette around the board to spell out a word or give an initial or find out a date or a number. Before that, it was literally this board with a pen attached to the top of it. And much like today, you'd have 2 to 3 people put their hands on the planchette, and as you would move the planchette around, the pen would spell out whatever they were trying to get an answer for.
I actually kind of like that better. That's kind of cool.
But
I'd like to try to
Yeah, we
be
should
the
try
one to
it.
interpret it at. Like,
So,
what does that scribble say?
I have a question. Would it make like mostly just words, or would it actually make pictures as well?
Now
Or-
that's a good one. I don't know about the pictures, but could you imagine sitting there and by the time you're done, you look at it and go, "Oh, what do we do? Oh shit, it's grandma." Like, we literally just did a portrait of our grandma. Like,
That's how
Picasso who?
Lauren's gonna contact
Right?
us.
I'm gonna die and I'm gonna make you guys actually illustrate shit. But it got to a point too, because think about it. If you're constantly going over a certain space over and over and over again, eventually whatever you wrote out is going to be illegible. So think about how Ouija boards are used now. It's literally letter by letter. So if you have a planchette with a pen on it, you're not just going to spell out the words. Sometimes it comes letter by letter. So you can't see exactly what that pen is writing or where you're going. It's not like one straight line. So it would get to points where it would be super illegible because you have all of these scribbles and all these different handwritings. And plus, you're not using a very nice pen and legibly writing something.
Hey, you don't know the
It's-
quality of the pens they used back then.
But you've got 2 people with 2 hands trying to write something. Like, if you take a pen and you position it into, like, your hand while you're trying to write something, it's not going to be very legible. Not to mention, a majority of how they wrote back in the day was with script and cursive.
It
So-
seems like it would almost be more bullshit proof doing it that way than if
Yeah,
someone was
honestly.
just looking at letters and being able to easily spell out things like,
But you also want to know what you're writing.
yeah.
So, on the chance that you actually were channeling something, wouldn't you want to see what you were writing and be like, well, that's great. I got gibberish. Like,
Yeah,
there's
that's
I got a
nothing
bunch of
there.
squiggles for you.
Grandma was trying to tell us something really heartfelt, and it's chicken scratch.
Maybe that's what she was trying to say.
Well, as the boards progressed, like, they actually, instead of just the board, then alphabet boards came into play. Where it was, instead of the person actually, like, the people writing something out with this planchette, they had a board where the alphabet was already on there, The number system was already on there. And the planchette, instead of using it as a writing utensil, was used mainly to point out what the letter or what the word was going to be. So you would have a separate person sit there and be the scribe to write down what came to fruition. Now, there's a couple different designs with this, too. They were known as spirit boards, talking boards, alphabet boards, scrying boards. And there's a couple of different designs with it. Ouija, the actual infamous board that everyone knows today, didn't come about until 1891.
A lot of people kind of know Ouija being born from the French word for yes, which means we, and the German word ja. But there's actually another theory that it was one of the investors, Elijah Bond's sister-in-law, Helen Peters, who was a medium that they credit also with the name. Apparently they asked the board what they should call it, and the name Ouija came through. And then when they asked what that meant, the board replied, "Good luck." So she was wearing a locket bearing the picture of a woman, and the name Ouija was above her head. And the woman in the locket, a lot of people believe to be the famous author and women's rights activist Ouida, which Peters also had this like adoration for. And Ouija was almost just this accidental misspelling of Ouida. So I didn't know that either. I always just thought it was just Ouija, as in, French and German put together.
Yeah, I've heard both stories of it too. But in America, you know how we have to mispronounce everything. When I grew up, I always thought it was Ouija, because everyone is Ouija.
Yeah,
Ouija
and
board.
people would get upset about it. They're like, no, it's Ouija. And now I'm finding out, no, it's Ouija. It's like,
yeah,
what
it's
is
always
it?
been Ouija, but I like to call it the Luigi. Or the Luigi. The Luigi board.
Spirit, are you with
like
us?
that.
Wow! So, just like the pronunciation of Samhain for Halloween, Americans, it's Samhain. No. No, it's Samhain.
We're not going to go into that.
Yeah, didn't Charmed do that?
Charmed, Supernatural, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. They all did
come on,
it.
guys, get good. Do your research.
I remember watching it in The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, and Austin was next to me, and they were like, "Oh, for Sam Hain," and
triggered.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why we're not getting into it.
I made Austin stop the TV show, and I screamed about it for a good long while, and finally he's like, "Can I go? Can we continue this without you pitching a fit?" And I was like, "Yes, fine."
Yeah, so back to Ouija boards.
Thank God.
Yeah, so Ouija was actually invented in 1886 by Charles Kennard, Elijah Bond, and Colonel Washington Bowie, but it didn't officially hit the market until 1891 because they couldn't prove that it actually worked. Like, they actually had to go to the patent office and show them that it worked. And they did it multiple times, too, and it didn't work.
And
Shocking.
By invented, you mean they took from another idea and were like, well, we're going to mass market our board and we're going to make a ton of money from our board, even though all of these other boards are already out there.
Yeah, because Europe had this going on for a while before America picked up on it.
Yeah. So,
capitalism.
At its finest.
Yeah, and from there, it really became super popular again during World War I, because again,
death.
Terrible war.
So, and it was mass marketed as like a mystical and family-friendly game, which still gets me that they're calling it a game because it's not a game.
Well, I think that was sort of their workaround to get it patented because they couldn't show that, like, oh, hey, it works. So they're pounding their head against the pavement, essentially, being like, how do we get this thing to the market? So they're like, well, what if we just call it a toy? Yeah. Because then it's it's fun for the family.
Yeah, this family thing.
Spook your friends, spook your family.
Yeah.
Make
little
money
Timmy.
from this. Yeah.
So, I mean, it was smart on there.
Contact a dead Grammy.
Yeah, because I know, after World War I, it, died down again.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know sort of what brought it back to the forefront was the great horror film, The Exorcist.
Classic.
Because in that film, the young girl who eventually gets possessed, spoilers, she was talking to the demon named Captain Howdy. Great name for a demon, by the way. But so everyone in that
The Exorcist is also Austin's favorite film.
Not favorite film, but favorite horror film.
In the horror genre.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. It's not even spooky, but it's still great. But yeah, so anyways, that came out in 70s, and then everyone freaked out about that movie. And so basically Hasbro, who owned the rights after Flood, or F-U-L-D, Flood, in 1966, he sold that patent of a Ouija board, which to the Parker brothers, or Fold.
It's Fold.
Sorry, butchering names here. But yeah, Parker brothers, which are now known as Hasbro, they bought the patent for that, and then they were like, oh, we can flood the market again and make a lot of money. So that's exactly what they did. So I always feel like throughout history you see a rise of this, and then it dies out, and then it comes back.
So we start seeing a decline in everything. The Satanic Panic started a little bit in the 70s when the media started covering serial killings. We're familiar with the Alphabet Killer, John Wayne Gacy, David Berkowitz. We have all of these fear-based news stories breaking, and then here comes the 80s with actual Satanism. Anton LaVey comes forward with the Satanic Bible. So Satanism really took a rise. But with the Satanic Panic there, you had all of this evangelical fear, and that's when the church really started knuckling down on spiritualism, playing around with these tools. They're devil's tools, you're conjuring spirits and you're consorting with the devil,
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like it was kind of the same thing with tarot, where it's almost like it takes away your free will, or that's what a lot of people thought. These things
they suck you in.
Yeah.
Tarot also, which again, that'll be in another part of our Divination series. Tarot also actually started as a actual card game. Tarot didn't originally start as a game. It didn't start as being an actual divination tool until much later.
Yeah, it was playing cards, right?
Yeah, so it's funny because Tarot originally didn't start as an actual divination tool, but then became that, whereas Ouija actually was a divination tool and was supposed to bring about the spiritualism and stuff, and then turned into a game.
Yeah.
So the two kind of
sense.
flipped. So with Ouija being marketed as a game, it almost made it easier for scientists and non-believers to jump on and start debunking everything with it. Going, oh, well, it's just a children's game, or, oh, these people are charlatans.
Yeah, they're faking it. They're making the planchette move, on their own.
Yeah, and by marketing it that way, it opened the door to more naysayers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because then you have people like, Dr. William Benjamin Carpenter that came in and found out everything about the idiot.
You can do this.
idiomotor.
We had to look up how we pronounced it.
I'm having
we can't
such a hard
say it
time.
without the voice.
Idiomotor.
I always thought it was
Idiomotor.
idiometer, so that's how I've been saying it, but I was completely wrong, so
What
there's
was the
that.
other one? Idiometer?
Idiomotor.
Idiomotor?
And then, yeah, it's
Idiomotor.
idiomotor. Good God. Like, easily, like, without in front of a microphone, I can say that word constantly. But now I'm like, speak
I'm
it into the
second-guessing
microphone.
myself so much here.
We've said the word so many times now that it's like, it's not even a word. It's
Yeah.
But basically, like, that refers to the whole idea that there's this influence of the unconscious mind on your muscle movements. So, you know, when people are using the Ouija board, like, it's actually these muscles that are, like, kind of making the planchette move around and not just, like, moving on its own. So, and that was something that was followed. It was backed up by Freud.
Well, yeah, because, I mean, he's, one of the founding people of psychology and, like, really driving it home and making it mainstream and everything like that. Honestly, I mean, I believe pretty much 99% of people's experiences with the Ouija board is, I want to say BS. Not BS in the sense that, like, their subconscious mind isn't doing something, but more so that there really isn't a spirit behind them being like, oh, hey, I'm moving your hands and I'm spelling things out for you. Because the idiomotor is, you know, they say it really can give you answers that you're looking for because it's tapping into your subconscious mind, which is almost a reaction very much like hypnic jerking. Like when you're falling asleep.
You mean hypnagogic jerking?
Hypnic jerking or whatever I don't know, whatever. But
this is a podcast and how we say things incorrectly.
Yeah. But they say it's essentially like a much minor version of that, but it's the same thing.
Well, yeah, because they say that it's like we have all this knowledge that, like, part of our brain, like our unconscious, like, mind, just, like, stores that our conscious mind can't easily tap into.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea is that, like, your unconscious mind is tapping into that knowledge and kind of almost giving you the answers to things. It's really strange. Like, I researched this one study by Sydney Fels, and she was a professor of electrical and computer engineering at UBC, and she, like, brought the Ouija board at this Halloween party that was attended by all these graduate students, and none of them knew, like, how it worked or what it was. A lot of them were foreign. They had no idea, like, what a Ouija board was. Some of them even thought that it needed batteries, like, and they were enthralled with it because it started working on its own. And during this whole study, the, like, students, they were asked a bunch of, like, really tough questions, and surprisingly, they were correct about 65% of the time, which is insane. Like, and it goes back to that whole thing of, like, we have this knowledge, these things that we know that we don't even realize that we know the answer to, that we're able to, like, tap into just by.
Well, one could even say that it's intuition, or it's. I'm sorry, I'm like, because the naysay kind of gets me, because when you have someone that actually has a gift and has used the gift and has used a Ouija board with the gift, it's, it frustrates me because I know how it works for me. And everyone goes, oh, well, just because this one person was faking it on the board and this one person was doing this and it's happened multiple times, that means everyone is doing this. And it's like, no.
Yeah, and I mean, I
Like,
also feel.
Stroke out there?
It's like, okay, but what if you actually have a gift? What if you actually are clairvoyant or claircognizant and you have delved into your intuition and you're able to do this? Like, I understand science is just now catching up with a lot of the stuff that back in the day was just seen as spiritual jargon and nonsense. So to be that person, to be like, it could be true, because as someone who actually used a Ouija board, and which we'll get into my story, and at the very end, you all are going to have to let us know what your thoughts are on Ouija boards.
And your stories, because
yes.
we really want to hear your stories as well.
Yeah, if you have any experience, because most of my stories, if you just want to sort of jump right into that, is all my experiences with it have been, that bullcrap. Like, there really hasn't, like, I've lifted my hands off of it and seen the damn planchette fly across the room because someone had put so much pressure on the thing. Like, that was moving it around, was answering exact questions that they wanted answers for, right? Like, all that kind of stuff. So my experience with it is very much a negative one, because I really do truly believe that, if a spirit wants to talk to you, it's going to come and talk to you. It's not going to be like, oh, yes, I'm here for your parlor tricks, and I'm here, let me grasp your shoulder, your wrist, and I'm going to move that around for you. But that's my take on it. Lauren, what's your story? Why don't you jump right into
don't
it?
Look at
your eyes are like glowing. Like,
I just want to say for the record, I've never touched a Ouija board. I've witnessed it happen, but I haven't actually put my hand on a planchette. So
witness me.
So Cassidy's never touched one.
No.
Amanda?
No, I've never touched one either. Like Cassidy, I've experienced like being in the room with one, but I've never actually like put my hands on a planchette.
Yeah, but Lauren,
yeah.
She's got lots of experience.
I only have 2 experiences with using a Ouija board. The second of the experiences, Cassidy and Amanda were present for, but they did never touch the board. They never touched the board.
Yeah. Correct.
So, Austin was not present for either of these encounters that I had.
No.
So, let's dive in. Once upon a time, Lauren was scared shitless of Ouija boards. Would not touch them. Like, just, of all the stories I heard and everything that I've heard, just, how Hollywood immediately goes, oh, this is horrible, oh, this is bad, don't touch it. I fell prey to that. I was just like, oh, I don't want to do anything bad. Like, and, as someone who's had a lot of weird shit happen to her, I'm like, with my luck, that would be me. I would be the one to just look at the board and poof, there's a demon. Like, so I was just like, poof,
there's a demon.
No.
Everything Lauren does ends up being the extreme, like, worst case scenario. Like,
Lauren can't just ever ease into something. It's always Lauren dips her toe, and then before you know it, Lauren's drowning in the middle of the lake.
Yep.
Like, there's no
in between.
Yeah,
like,
it's one or the other. So, when I started diving into more of my gifts and learning more about history of things and just everything, I was like, okay, I want to try this. But I knew that if I ever tried using a Ouija board, I was going to be extremely careful. Like, I was going to have all of my crystals on me. I was going to make sure that I shielded myself and that I was, I prepared myself for it. So it was Samhain of 2018, and I was with a group that I frequent, and this was my first Samhain with this group. Now, I was with individuals that I trust, that I was like, okay, I know their practices, they know exactly what they're doing, and the person who introduced me to all of this was a very experienced person as far as Ouija, as far as just pagan practices and all of this stuff. This person was also the first person to tell me that I had gifts and that there was a name for all the shit I was experiencing. So when I went and had my Ouija experience, I knew it wasn't going to just be some stupid shit. And especially because the person I was going, like, that I was on the board with at first, knew of my abilities and knew of everything that I was doing, I felt safe. I didn't feel like I had to fear anything. So I was super nervous and I didn't know what to expect. And of course I had all of these horror stories in the back of my head screaming, but I knew I had to. I just had to find it out for myself and see for myself if it really did merit something. So we are at, it's Samhain, and we're inside, and there was a group of us. And they're very open. Nobody, if you didn't want to be a part of what was going on in the room where we were doing Ouija, you can go upstairs, you can be elsewhere. You didn't have to be down there, which I respect that, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable with it. So
yeah, I did think about leaving the room, but I was like,
I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah.
Because then we got to experience what we experienced together.
Well, yeah, like Lauren said, we trusted everybody that was in that room, and we felt safe. And that's huge. And
having you guys there for the second time to actually see things really validated my first experience, too. Because after I get through explaining what happened, I was left wondering if it actually did happen or if it was just all subconscious. So, we're getting ready. I'm on the board, and it's me and this other person. And I think the first time, my energy was just so high-strung. I was so nervous, and I didn't really know what to do. I've never actually put my hands on the board before, and I was just kind of going with the flow. So when the planchette started taking off, immediately I was just like, oh God, oh God, oh God, oh God, this is it, this is where it goes, oh God, oh God, oh God. But then I started to realize that, you know what, it's fine. It's a board. What the fuck do I have to be afraid of?
That's right. You stand up to that piece of plywood or particle board or whatever it's made of.
So once I started to relax and let my mind kind of center, even the person I was with, they were like, we're not really getting much. So, we waited a little bit longer. Then as I'm on the board, the best way to describe it is letters started forming in my head, or little words would start forming. So I was going, okay, V. So I knew to move it over to V. Then another letter would form. Okay, so I know to move it over to this letter form. And for me personally, my experience on the board wasn't that, my hands are just automatically jerking over here and jerking that way. For me, it was an experience where whoever I was contacting, they could see the board, and it was easier for them to point out what letter they needed to spell out the word.
So you were channeling someone.
Yeah, I was actually channeling someone and using it as a tool to help that communication.
So it wasn't like the spirit or the ghost gripping your wrist and moving it.
No.
It was whispering in your ear, V for victory. A for Adam.
And to be honest, I'd have to look back at my notes on the whole experience. I don't remember exactly what was spelled out, but it was me on one side of the board, the other person was on the other, and we were sitting cross-legged on the floor. We had the board resting on both of our knees, and we each had our hands ever so slightly placed on the planchette. And then we had a designated person who was the scribe. So whenever a letter was there, they would yell out what letter it was, and the scribe would write it down. So when we were done, or when we felt the spirit was getting tired, I guess, we could see what was being spelled out. We can see the message that was coming through, and it would help us be able to ask, okay, well, what questions are there, And on modern day Ouija boards, you have the whole alphabet, 2 rows of the alphabet. You have a hello and a goodbye. You have a yes and a no, and then you have the number system. So a lot of the questions that you ask, if it's easier for them to say yes or no, you kind of, depending on the spirit that you're talking to, you have to plan out your questions that way. When I was on the board that time, we had someone who was a little bit older and was trying to spell stuff out, but they weren't really good when it came to writing or arithmetic. So the words that came out weren't spelled properly, or they weren't spelled correctly.
Because this could have been like a spirit that never even learned how to read or write.
It can be, we've had, in the time that I was there and we were on the board, there was a child on the board. So a lot of the questions had to be yes or no questions because they couldn't spell. And we've had, we had someone's ancestor that was Pennsylvania Dutch. So you have to take into account who you're talking to. For all you know, you could be talking to someone who's speaking a different language. So when the words or letters are forming, you go, oh, well, that's gibberish. Is it gibberish, or is it in a different language? Or, for example, someone who speaks like, what's the word? Where they write out things exactly how it sounds coming out of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like speech to talk. So like if I say like utter instead of other, like other, but they pronounce it utter, like odder, like, and you're writing it down, you go utter, odor, like trying to sound it out and how it would sound if it was actually coming out of that person's mouth. So the experience takes a little bit, and you have to kind of maneuver and see what works for you. But once I finally like got a handle on it, I was like, okay. Then I started doubting myself. I'm like, is this really happening? Am I actually just going insane, or am I pushing these things because this is what I want to happen? So I took a break. I was like, you know what? That's good. I had my taste. Had my milk. I'm good. Like, let's go do something else. So I took a break, and just the idea of me sitting on the board was just swirling in my head, like over and over again. Like, was it really real? Was it just subconscious? So I took a break after my mind was reeling, and I forgot what I did. I went out somewhere, and I think I actually went and grabbed like a bite to eat in a different room. And then when I came back, I felt an energy change, and it was not something I had ever personally felt before. And I just remember my hands getting really tingly and just my mind not understanding what was happening. You know, I'm still kind of reeling for the fact that I had my hands on a Ouija board, you know, this huge demonic thing of Hollywood, and, you know. So I get closer, and I notice that there's two other people on the board. And as I got closer and I saw what they were asking whoever they were contacting on the board and what was coming through on the board, I was dumbfounded because it dawned on me I knew who they were talking to. They were talking to someone that had recently passed in my life. And these two people who, they don't know me personally at this point. They're brand new into my life. So they wouldn't know anything that's happened to me or happened in my history at that point. So I immediately was in disbelief, but then the more and more I saw them saying the same thing over and over again, it was like whatever's on the board is trying to get my attention. So I immediately chimed in. I'm like, I know who you're talking to. I know their name, and it's someone close to me. Like, I know exactly who it is. So right off the bat, the person who was facilitating it, who was like almost like my mentor, she was very, very adamant. She's like, you are not to touch the board. You are too emotionally attached to this. You can ask questions, but you cannot touch the board. You can't. Like, it needs to be someone who is outside of the situation. And so I was like, okay. So when I was asking questions, and these people who don't know my past, who don't know anything about the situation, when they were answering things and the answers were coming back all true, I was like, oh shit. Oh, okay. This is real. I'm not imagining this because I'm in a room full of people and they're seeing it too. So dealing with an experience like that, and eventually before I left that night, I did muster up the courage to get back on the board. And I did come across another spirit with somebody, and the same thing. I wasn't having the planchette fly out of my hands, or like my hand wasn't imagining like just all of a sudden shooting across the board and then shooting on the other side and coming with quippy answers.
Wasn't Hollywood? Wasn't there a movie like the Ouija board movie?
It's just called Ouija.
Or
Ouija. They were
Luigi.
Yeah, I think they even like spelled it differently too for the title.
I don't know, but like
I never watched it.
I'm just picturing how I would be like on the board and like because my mind is blank a lot of times. It's just like crickets.
Yeah, and I was like, when I first sat down, I was just like, I don't know what to do. Do I start moving? Does it start moving? Like, when does the music hit? Like, when does the dramatic build-up start? Because
I ain't getting no letters up there. Ain't nothing happening.
Just chirp. No, it just spells chirp. Chirp. You just get that on loop.
And again, it was the same thing that happened. It wasn't automatic, like, movement. It was stuff started forming in my mind that would spell something out. And the scribe, like, I'd point to the letter and I would say exactly what I was feeling, but I'd still use the board as a messaging system. And then the scribe would write it down and then be like, okay, this is what it said. And we'd structure our questions from there. Now, I remember when I came home after that experience, I didn't know how to talk to you about it because I'm like, how do I talk about this situation to someone who wasn't there? Like, was it actually a thing, or were all of us in that room collectively tripping balls?
Yes.
So, and I remember hesitantly telling you, and you were just like, okay.
Well, because like,
interesting, but
I mean, I own two different boards.
You own two different boards now.
Well, yeah,
because I got them for you.
But I've always been interested, even though I've always had like bad experiences with it. But Amanda and Cassie, you guys said you were there and you witnessed stuff even though you weren't on there.
The following year.
So
yeah. The following year when I went, I had Cassie and Amanda come with me, and I wanted them to see kind of how Samhain went with a different group. I wanted them, it was a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And also I knew the Ouija boards were going to come out again. And
they always come out.
I wanted them there so they could see for themselves how it was.
Yeah, so what did you guys see? Who wants to jump in first?
Well, I think what happened with me, even though I wasn't on the board, was before you got on the board, Lauren. There was two people on the board, and I was kind of sitting, like, kind of right above the board, and they kept going back and forth between two letters, and in my head, I'm thinking, those are the initials of a relative of mine that had passed away, like the previous year. And I was like thinking in my head, I was like, no, maybe.
You second guess everything.
Yeah.
Because you're like, well, maybe it's just coincidence. Maybe it's that. And that's exactly how I felt the first year. Like.
And when I asked them, the people at the board, I was like, well, this was my relative's name. And they're like, well, why don't you ask if it's your relative? And I asked, and it went straight to yes. So that hit kind of hard. But
I have to say, with the questions that they ask too, because the group that we usually go and have these experiences with, they don't really force these situations.
Right.
They try to ask questions that it wouldn't just be common knowledge, you know? Like, for example, if it's a family member, like say it's an aunt or an uncle, and it's like, oh, well, my uncle's name was this. Oh, is this person related to you? Well, yes, because it's my, I just literally said it was my ex or my aunt so-and-so. Like, so they ask questions that wouldn't be something that everybody in the room would know.
Yeah,
to try
and
sway.
that was the next thing they told me to ask. They said, well, is there like a specific thing that you want to ask that maybe that person will know? And I did ask a very specific question that only relates to me and that person. And it validated that it was actually my family member. So that like even made it more like real.
So you were shook.
Yeah.
That whole like, and it took me a while too to get back on the board.
Yeah,
when we were
you
there.
were really hesitant.
I was nervous. Like, I was like, I want to do this because I want them to see, but also I don't know if I'm ready.
Right.
I didn't know if I was capable of doing it. Almost like I definitely second guessed myself. And my ego definitely took over through everything because I was just like, what if I really am crazy? This would be me finding out that I actually am crazy. So
yeah, it wasn't until like the quote unquote leader of the group was like, hey, Lauren, why don't you get on the board?
every time.
Yeah, that's when a lot of like my physical like changes started. Like I was feeling stuff. It was like kind of a weird heaviness in the room. Like I remember looking at you, Amanda, and being like,
we were
Do you feel that?
Yeah, we were sitting next to each other on the couch, and like we just kept looking at each other like with like huge eyes, like holy shit.
Yeah, we were terrified.
Meanwhile, I'm looking at the board going, holy shit.
And what's crazy is I actually remember, and I don't even think I've shared this with you guys, but there was a point when I think one of my relatives actually popped up, but they asked, they were like, does anyone know anyone by the name of da-da-da? And I didn't say anything, but I actually did. I was just so nervous and like going in my head about it, and I had all these doubts and stuff that I didn't speak up at the time, and I really wish I would have. But
nope, can't recall.
We don't know who she is.
Uncle, anyone have an Uncle Chester? No.
Nah.
Nope, can't recall.
Never heard of him.
Well, it's not like we were thick as thieves or anything growing up. Nope.
Got his name tattooed right here.
Yeah, nope.
Like something like ridiculous like that.
This whole thing, unrelated.
Well, when Lauren was on the board, when questions were asked, Cassidy and I, there was like a little gap between us. We would feel like a breeze go in between us and out again, as the answer had finished. It was just like back and forth, and we thought, it was a vent or something. Nope, there weren't any vents around.
Was someone farting a lot?
Lauren wasn't too close, so she
Damn.
I hate you all.
But yeah, it was like, I remember whenever I have weird shit like this happen, it's like my body just like freaks out. I get weird vibrations and tingles all over the place.
Yeah, your hands and like your feet get really cold, and the rest of your body gets really hot.
Yeah, my body was on overdrive that night for sure.
Like when I got on that board that night, the same thing happened as the first time. You know, the energy spiked, and I was getting that. Now I immediately am like, it's nerves. It's nerves. That's all this is nerves. But it was the tingling sensation in my hands, and I could not contain my energy. Like I was bouncing up and down. I was just like, okay, what is this? Why am I doing this? Okay. And when I finally put my hands on the board again, I was quick to start picking stuff up immediately almost. Whereas before it took a little bit, but that's also because like it was my first time. This time, the moment I touched the board, my body almost like knew exactly, okay, let's do this. So I was able to pick up on more stuff, and I kind of knew what to do and what was going to happen. And it was the same thing, you know, instead of my body jerking one way or jerking the other way, it would go, okay, it would either a letter would pop in my head or a complete word would pop into my head, and eventually like sentences, you know, and at that point it was like, well, do I just spell everything out by hand or do I just say what it is? So I was doing like a combination of the two. So, and this was brand new to me. This was before I knew about channeling, before I knew about mediumship and all that stuff. So yeah. And when I lock in, I don't remember half the time. Like I remember afterwards, you guys had to kind of fill in the blanks on what happened, because I don't remember anything.
Yeah, from the outside looking in, you and the other person that were on the board, like, you were in complete, like, your eyes were closed, you were in, like, this full
and when you
zen, like, kind of...
Yeah, and when you did open your eyes, because you did open them a few times, your eyes were glazed over.
Yeah.
Like you weren't there.
And afterwards, you were shaking like crazy.
Mm-hmm. I have no... And even afterwards, too, I remember the letters forming, but I couldn't tell you what I spelled out. I couldn't tell you what letters they were now. I couldn't tell you any of that stuff. It's been through other people's accounts of filling in those gaps that I'm like, okay, all right. And this one, too, really got to me because this was the first time, my friends are here witnessing Lauren, quote unquote, trip balls on the floor, like, with a Ouija board in hand. Like, so now I'm like, okay, I'm doing this. You know, no one's laughing at this. No one's calling me crazy. So, okay, something's actually happening. And towards the end, when we actually channeled a really sad case, a little lost soul, and all the stuff that came through with that, like, it broke my heart. And it was, and that's kind of like a good segue into safe practices, because you don't know what you're going to pick up with something like this. Yeah. Like, there's people who have these gifts who don't even know it, and then they go and they touch something like a divination tool or a Ouija board, for example, and all of a sudden stuff starts happening. And sure, it starts out as fun and games and let's see what happens, but ultimately you could be contacting something, you know, and with that, you don't know what you're contacting.
It ain't a joke.
Yeah, you don't know whether it's good or it's bad.
Like, so life and death. Ultimately, whoever you're contacting with that board, they aren't here.
Right.
Which means at one point or another, they passed away. They died. Mm-hmm. And death in of itself isn't funny. So it's tragic. It's one thing if you pass peacefully and you have a family member that's, waiting for you on the other side and you contact that family member. But a lot of the times, the souls that come through are ones that can't let go. They can't move on to that other side because they're holding on to something. Whether it's, they don't know they're dead. Mm-hmm. So they finally found a way to communicate, It could be they're pissed off. They died because of maybe they died because they were murdered. Maybe they were wronged or they had a wrongful death, Or maybe it was something tragic that even the ghost itself or the spirit itself cannot fully comprehend. It's...
Well, could that go into, could it just been like some trickster kind of thing?
Well, I was going to get into that,
Okay.
With that, I mean, sure, there's these loved ones that pass, but there's also a lot of, with light, there's going to be darkness. There's ones that are tricksters, ones that are pissed off. You know, you could be contacting something quote unquote demonic or something that is a trickster.
Yeah, and you never know if they're actually trying to play off as a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you have to be really careful.
Like, there's a lot. That's the thing. Nobody knows what happens after we pass away.
Right.
Nobody knows for sure what is out there, what's on a different plane, you know? And paranormal investigators are always going to be chasing after that until there's some sort of concrete proof that we can all be like, yep, there's no way we can debunk, or there's no way that it can be debunked. There's no scientific evidence behind it, or there's to debunk it. You know, it's a big question mark.
Yeah.
So with all of that, you still have to take into account, is it good? Is it bad? You know, maybe you contact something that didn't intentionally come through to be bad, but ultimately turns out bad.
Yeah.
So with that, always, always, always use safe practices. Mm-hmm. Don't just pick up a Ouija board going, this looks like fun.
Sleep over, get some pizza, have some snacks, and
with that,
pull out that game.
When I did my first experience and the experience following it, I was with individuals who had used a Ouija board before, who had actual knowledge of the history of the Ouija board, the practices of how to use it, what not to do, making sure that, oh, you are emotionally attached to this, don't touch the board, it can easily manipulate you just in case it isn't that individual.
Yeah.
You know, there was discipline. They made sure that you followed that. You know, if I would have just picked up a Ouija board on my own and was just like, hey, let's do this, like, I wouldn't have known any of that. Mm-hmm. And even with our research, you don't find any of that.
Right.
You can get the history, you get the horror stories, but they don't tell you, oh, best practices.
Yeah.
Like, user error. Like, it's, you just have to be familiar with the stuff that's out there. You have to do your research. You have to go out and get experience. Find people who have had experience with this and know what to do to be safe about it.
Yeah, because they always go over, like, worst-case scenario type situations. Like, oh, you're already fucked? Well, burn it, I guess. I don't know. Like,
it's way easier to put up protection to prevent anything bad from coming in than it is to try and close a door you've already opened and try to get rid of the entities that you've already welcomed into your home.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors to look into with that. For example, I know everyone's like, it's the spooky season, y'all. With that, Samhain's coming up.
Yep.
Halloween's coming up.
Mm-hmm.
The thinning of the veil. Now, that is...
That just threw me.
Spooky season,
it's
y'all.
Spooky season, y'all. Like, all right. Serious talk. Spooky season. Like, it's all good.
Well, we harped on this before, but with Samhain coming up, it's the thinning of the veil, which means it's not going to take a lot to invite other forces or other things into your lives, whether it's your home, whether it's the home of your friends, like all of these things you need to take responsibility for.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, we've talked about it together, but I don't think we've said it on the podcast. This year in particular, the veil is thinner than ever. Like, it started
tissue
thinning
paper
earlier than it ever has.
Single ply toilet paper thin.
Oh, that's the worst.
Ooh, finger right through it.
Yeah. But just use your heads. Like, use
Don't be
common
stupid.
sense.
Don't be like me.
So when are we going to play with one?
No.
Yes.
No.
But I want to. I have two.
No.
Maybe if enough people request it, we'll consider it.
Yeah, and we'll...
Maybe if we hit a certain follower goal.
Yeah, we'll do like a video on it and we'll put it up on YouTube.
500 followers, we'll play around with the Ouija board.
Yeah, sure, why not?
Yeah.
I'm down.
All right, guys, that's your challenge. 500 follower goal. And
share us with people.
Yeah, which means you gotta help share us. But at 500 followers, we'll do an actual YouTube video of us with the board.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
right.
good Lord. But back to safe practices. Never, ever, ever use a Ouija board alone. Even back in the day before it was the Ouija board and it was the planchette, you had at least 2 people on the board and there was someone taking down note on the scrying or the scribing, like writing down what was spelled out or what was said or what had happened. You know, you want to do it where you have other people there because think about how vulnerable you are when you're just by yourself. I mean, shit, I do it. If you watch a scary movie, Home Alone at night, you start hearing things.
Oh, I thought you meant like actually just watching Home Alone. I was like, that's not that scary.
It's freaking terrifying. The wet bandits left me with a lot of nightmares. But think about how stupid you get when you're home alone. Like, you hear something on the window. Is it a burglar? Is it a ghost? Or is it the wind blowing? Like, you immediately jump on something and you're quick to write it off as something else. Like,
Yeah.
So 2 or more if you decide you're going to do it.
Yeah. Also, if you think about it, having more people there with you kind of makes it more credible and validating for the most part.
Sometimes.
Depends on who. But
Yeah, like I
true.
said,
Like if it
my
was-
experience is planchettes
Yeah.
flying across the room because
But,
so
like-
much force is on it.
I mean, we're like a special case.
Yeah, like, you
Like, if
guys,
it was
for
us-
sure, you're the only people that I would probably do a Ouija board with, to be
Yeah.
honest. So,
Yeah, you guys and then our group on the outside.
Yeah.
not some random homeless person
No.
in the alley,
No.
Chicago.
Hey,
No.
Stinky Pete. You need a Ouija board.
Maybe. I was drunk enough.
Oh my god. No, and that's the other thing. Make sure you are of sound heart and mind.
Yeah.
If you have to be of sound heart and mind to get married to someone, you should be of sound heart and mind to work a Ouija board.
I think the commitment's a little different.
I don't know. You could be stuck with that soul spirit entity for the rest of your life if you don't know how to get rid of it.
Ghostbusters.
So,
Let me
yeah,
tell you,
it is
it
a
ain't
commitment.
fun. You don't want that.
Everything boils down to your intention. Why are you using the board? Are you using the board for shits and giggles, or are you actually using it to contact someone? You know, are you using it because you want to be a little shit and try and actually summon something? Or are you using it just for sheer curiosity? You know, keep in mind, curiosity killed the cat. You still want to be able to take the necessary precautions because worst case scenario, nothing does happen. You know? And you can go on your way being the skeptic mind, thinking that, you know, it's just another toy. You know? But on the offhand that you do have something happen, A, it's best to be sure that A, you have other people there to witness it. B, that you protect yourself from that because, as stated before, protecting yourself is a lot easier than trying to clean up the aftermath afterwards.
You don't want to contact some shit like Zozo, which we'll go into further in maybe a part 2 of this, but
Yeah, if he's even real. But
right.
once again, we'll touch into that.
Yeah.
Good old
We hit that
Zozo.
500 followers.
Yep.
Everything always boils down to how you use it, the things you put, like the meanings and your intention behind it. So we'd love to hear your stories. We'd love to hear any stories of maybe you have a friend or a family member that experienced something, or
Maybe you had a slumber party where you busted out those snacks and that pizza and you're like, let's pull out the glow-in-the-dark one. My sister can definitely relate to that.
again, like, share, follow, subscribe, find us on social media. We will see you guys next week. And with that, stay spooky, folks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.